Hi everyone, and welcome to the 4th episode of Slime Time Sidequest, an official Dragon's Den podcast. This is Plattym3.
And this is Yangus the Legendary Bandit.
Full disclosure, Yangus and I have been taking turns picking topics here for these first 4 episodes of Sidequest, and this week it's my turn again. So much like when we were talking about the GBA and GBC last month, this week's episode has come about completely due to just what I've been playing recently. And we'll get...
You're going to spoil the magic of how we make these episodes.
Yeah. But see, I bought this game to just review for RP Gamer last week called Nexomon because it looked cute. Some of the earlier reviews looked good. So thus we came up with the not Pokemon episode you're about to hear.
Yep, that's right. While we won't be talking about Pokemon, there are plenty of other Mon-like series we will be discussing, like Digimon, Monster Hunter Stories, Monster Rancher, Yokai Mon Watch.
Now, wait a minute. That last one doesn't have Mon in the name.
It doesn't?
No.
That's weird. Well, anyway, there are lots of monster catching games out there, and a lot of these series owe their roots back to titles like Megami Tensei 1 and 2 on the Famicom and Dragon Quest V for the Super Famicom. Those were two of the first RPG series to feature monster collecting in some form. And from there, we saw series like Pokemon, Digimon, and others spring up from it. And even today, we still see new series pop up like Yokai Watch and Nexomon and a few others that have come here and there. So that's all led to what we're going to be discussing on tonight's episode.
That's right. And joining us tonight, we've set some lures, held out some meat. We did just about everything but throw a Pokeball. And joining us, we have our one of our regular guests, Bururian. And our kind of first-timer, Saigan. And I do mean kinda because he was a host of the original Slime Time podcast way back from the summer of 2012. Welcome, guys.
Howdy. Thank you.
Hey, what's going on?
Well, with a party of 4, I think we can manage all these different franchises. So let's get things started with good old Dragon Quest Monsters.
And Saigan, welcome back to being on Slime Time.
Thanks. It's been a while.
Yeah, I mean, you started all this.
Well, I'd also have to point out assistance from the Dwayne and Mimus and, oh man, who else did we have back then? Destructor, bunch of
the one giving all the Joker advice?
I think he might have been the one giving all the old Joker advice. You'll have to excuse me if that's incorrect. It's been 8 years. 8 years. But yeah, we had a bunch of old Dragon's Den people on the show for those few episodes that we did.
Yeah. So, you know what? I'm going to turn things over to you first. Why don't you tell us about your experiences with Dragon Quest Monsters? What have you played? What have you really liked about the series through the lots of iterations it's gone through?
So I've been kind of a late bloomer with the Monsters series. I didn't get started on it until Joker 2. And then I've been kind of going backwards in just this weird, bumpy order. I've played Joker 2. Really, really enjoyed that one. It's definitely my favorite out of the ones that I've played. It's just much more playable. It's so much more streamlined. The breeding is excellent. And, you know, back in the day before it was the Game Freak servers, I think, shut down. Not Game Freak, GameSpy. When the GameSpy servers shut down, there was a multiplayer scene for it back in the day, even in the West. So that was a lot of fun. Played some of Joker 1. It's not near as playable as Joker 2. And then I've spent some time on the original Terry's Wonderland on the Game Boy. That one is a grind. That's the nicest thing I can say about it.
That is an understatement, if I've ever heard one.
It is brutal. Fortunately, Dragon Quest Monsters 2, I just played that, I think, last year for the first time, and I can see why everyone loves that and has it as a favorite. It was just fantastic from beginning to end. Wonderful single-player content.
Definitely. I know that's, out of all those, that's my favorite. That's the only game, any monster collecting, any game I feel like I've ever been able to say I did 100% on. I had 2 Game Boy Advances back then, but I had the old Game Boy Color link cable, and you could still link Game Boy Colors together on Game Boy Advances back then. And if you breed across, because I had both copies of the game, and if you breed across the link cables, you both get a monster back.
Oh, nice.
So, and it would depend upon which way you breed, because there's a breeding combinations. If you mix a slime with a dragon, like if you put the slime in first, then, or I think that it's the order of it.
It's the order, yeah, and then it stays within that family. So a slime and a dragon would get you a Drac slime, I think.
Yep. But when you would do that over the link cable, whoever put the slime in would get like the Drac slime, but whoever put the dragon in would get like the dragon monster, half the breeding that would. So I don't think, after a certain point in the game, because I played through like 30, 40 hours, beat the main game with one copy, and then I started up another one. And then all I would do is, if I had 2 high-level A rank, S rank monsters, the question mark, the boss family, basically, I would trade one over to my second copy. Then I would breed, get, the monster I really want, usually another really high-level monster, and then trade that one back. So I spent a lot of time just trading back and forth, but I'd always have so many monsters. I'd result in no net loss. I'd sit there and do that for 2 hours and end up with 10 more monsters, but really I'd have all these extra great breeding things left behind. So that one, breeding wise, and just, the infinite worlds with the keys and everything, that was definitely my favorite. I've enjoyed all the other ones. I've liked Caravan Heart. I'll defend that one forever. I know most people can't get past the first hour because of the food mechanic and the hunger. But I've dealt with that in mystery dungeon games, and you just get past it, and after an hour or two into the game, you have spells and you got enough money that you got enough bread that it doesn't even become a factor anymore. And that one's got a pretty robust post game, finding just orbs all the time and opening different places with all these different orbs. And I think I've beat it twice, but it is definitely the more obscure bastard stepchild. There's a reason they've made Terry's Wonderland 3DS, and there's a reason why they did Dragon Quest Monsters 2 remake for the 3DS and never touched Caravan Hearts again.
There's just no word of Caravan Hearts. They're like,
Nope.
Let's make Joker 3. Let's announce another one with Eric and Mia. Let's just forget about Kiefer.
Yeah, just sweep that one aside. It happened, it was there, but you're never going to see it again. Totally different breeding mechanic, and you had you had human party members that led different caravans with the monsters in them, but you had to go around collecting humans as well, and you'd get different ranked humans. Mainly was based on their weight. You could get really heavy humans and really light humans, and it affected how big your caravans and monsters could be.
That does sound like a major change to the formula.
Oh yes. Yeah, you basically had, by the end, you had 3 different... Actually, I'm sorry, I started that off wrong. The monsters were the caravan leaders. It was the humans that you were mainly collecting. You could breed the monsters, so you'd have like a great drac leading the caravan, dragging the wagon, but who was in the wagon was a bunch of humans. And yeah, if you got really heavy fighters, like the great drac could only hold so many guys in their wagon, and they would fight and the humans would fight. It was a total different mechanic. I mean, completely different. So I enjoyed it for what it was. It was not the others, but I love the others more. It's all pretty good. We had Z6N4 on quite a few episodes ago, back in December. And he's the one who led the team that fan-translated Joker 3, fan-translated Terry's Wonderland 3DS. It was great having him on. Seen him posting again recently in GBA Temp, because he did, as he told us, he's done 90% of the work for the Dragon Quest Monsters 2 one. He is completely stalled because there is, as he called it, the needle in the haystack. He can't find the trigger to allow text box to overflow, like have a second text box. So all this story content he's translated won't fit because the English language takes a lot more characters than Japanese.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of people who keep an eye out on these fan translations might not realize that it's not just translating text. There's a lot of coding in there, and you have to really unravel a lot of the code that's in there. And that's why, we never got things like Dragon Quest IV on the PlayStation, because it's just so much more work than just translating text.
Yeah, what's interesting is even months before talking to him, Team Rocket was on. Haha, Pokemon reference. But Team Rocket, the guys that did Rocket Slime 3 or Slime Mori Mori 3, and just about a year now, because it was August 2019, they put out the beta for that, the fan translation, and I played through it, and we interviewed them. And that was actually something that they just kind of brought up natively, talking about the game. They're like, oh yeah, one of the hardest things was, trying to get all the English text in there, and once we found this trigger, it worked. And I know Z6N4, he's been in contact with them. They helped him. He's helped them back and forth on their different projects. But apparently that Dragon Quest Monsters 2 one, the trigger is somewhere completely different than all the other 3DS games that we've had fans translated. And there is a new attempt right now. Someone's already starting it, and on the Den's Discord, we've got someone just joined this weekend, and he's been talking about it, and he's been messaging me on the Den. There is a new effort to just get a translation out for that game of monster names, spells, skills, items, and menu. Just, leave the story part untranslated. You can follow around with an FAQ. If you played the game before, it'll be pretty much whatever. Use Google Translate, hold your phone up. But at least have everything so you could battle and know how to breed and all that stuff translated and in there. So, don't know how that'll go. They're making progress. They're looking for people to help. But that's over on GBA Temp.
I was going to say, isn't that how they had to do or handle the fan translation for Joker 2 Professional, where they pretty much just had to be like, okay, we're just going to keep everything that's already translated from the original, but we're not going to translate the new stuff, just the menus and monster names, so you can at least figure out that part. The new content, you're on your own.
I don't know. I don't know if that ever got far.
Was like
okay.
Back when that project started, but it's been so long. It might have evolved past that by now.
And I know someone asked about Joker 3 Professional the other day over on GBA Temp, and part of the team was like, actually, we're pretty far along there. We just haven't worked on it in a while. We got pretty far and life happened, so sorry. Progress stopped. But Yangus, what games have you played? What do you got to say about Dragon Quest Monsters?
So I talked about this when I was first on the podcast, but Monsters was my introduction to Dragon Quest as a whole. The original Dragon Warrior Monsters was a game that I just kind of picked up by chance because my parents were like, okay, so you're not really liking the Game Boy Color game we picked out for you, so we'll let you pick out whatever game you want to get. And just by chance, that's the first one that I picked up. And kind of like what Saigan said, where it was really grindy, I had a lot of trouble with Dragon Warrior Monsters as a kid. It was a game that was, for one, my first RPG that I played, and it was just really hard to get into and sort of figure out what to do while playing. And even though I did kind of struggle with it, I did try and make as much progress as I could. It definitely helped once I learned how to save the game so I didn't have to keep repeating everything. That helped out a lot. But what really got me to become a fan of the series was Dragon Quest Monsters 2. I had gotten both Terra's Adventures and Kobe's Journey one year for Christmas. I think the year it came, the two of them came out. And I got the guidebook along with it as well that had all the breeding patterns and all the different worlds and where you can go to and how like the mystery keys work so you can access new bonus worlds once you beat the game. All that good stuff. And what I enjoyed about it was that you get to explore all these different key worlds and you get to meet new monster allies in every different kingdom that you travel to through the magic key doors. I wasn't very good at the game. Like I said, I wasn't that great at the games as a kid, but I kind of slowly figured my way out, or slowly figured my way through, Dragon Warrior Monsters 2 once I had read through the book a bit more, and things started making a bit more sense, especially after playing some of Dragon Warrior Monsters 1. I was kind of able to not quite feel my way through as much and was more like, okay, well, now I know how this works, so I'll be more prepared for the second one. And I think that's why I still hold Dragon Warrior Monsters 2 as a game that's really close to my heart, not only because it got me into the Dragon Quest series as a whole, but it was one where I felt like I was really starting to understand sort of what RPGs expected from you as the player, where you needed to, make sure your party stands strong. If you have a favorite, that's okay, but maybe try and look for some options to either strengthen yourself or, don't be afraid to go off and explore new places to find new allies for yourself. And really, the most fun that I had with that game, too, was as I going through and going to all these different worlds, was trying to find a way to save the Kingdom of Great Log, because in Dragon Warrior Monsters 2, the whole plot kicks off because the little prince of the kingdom, I think his name is Prince Kamea, if I remember right, he ends up causing the plug that basically keeps the kingdom of Great Log afloat on the ocean. He makes that totally pop off of essentially what holds all of the power of the kingdom in, and without that power source being blocked off, the power is draining from the island, which is causing it then to sink into the ocean, and eventually it would just completely disappear beneath the ocean waves. So your whole entire goal for the game is to try and find a new way to safely plug up that magic hole where all of the power is coming from, so you can then, prevent the island from sinking and save the kingdom. And I liked how, as you played through the game, you had different problems that came up from the different worlds you travel to, that everybody was trying to help you, but you still had adversaries like Prince Kamea trying to one-up you, even though he was the problem in the first place, and he doesn't understand how dire the situation is. And then you have like the mysterious hunter who keeps showing up and challenging you. And then what I thought was cool as a kid was that when you get to the fourth world, the Sky World, you finally find a treasure, like an ancient castle that's, funny enough, guarded by Mudu from Dragon Quest VI. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I don't find Mudu that threatening, because it's like, oh, he's not that scary. He's just a big fat monster looking thing. But I remember when beating him back in the day and going into the chamber with all the treasure chests, and that's finally where you found that big stockpile of gold and treasure chests and all that good stuff, that you finally are able to find a seal that will finally cover up the magic hole in the Kingdom of Great Log. But then suddenly you're attacked by Dark, with a real creative name like that. He's very threatening. But he's essentially the king of Limbo, which is sort of this in-between world. And I remember as a kid that was kind of intimidating going to that world as well, because it felt like a real challenge. And that was sort of what I really enjoyed about the series as a kid, especially that game in particular, that as you kept going, that there's eventually this big bad that would show up, and he's like the last roadblock before you can officially, save the day. And I like that the other Monsters games sort of do that same thing. Like Joker 2 has those ancient ruins that you discover, and then you end up going beneath them and you find, I don't remember what his name is. I think it's Maneval Leon X, if I remember right. And he's like this giant lion guardian of that island of Joker 2. And then you can end up finding another set of ruins after you defeat him that contains an even more evil being. And, it's kind of just typical Dragon Quest stuff with things like that, but I kind of enjoy that sense of like, oh, this is, kind of seriously, it's a big threat to the world. I kind of like that trope a bit. But for the games themselves, like, I just enjoyed the monster collecting, and it's kind of why I enjoyed them a little bit more than Pokemon as a kid, because I like the Toriyama designs, and I've read through that. Magazine for Monsters 2 so many times. Like, it's just pretty much package taped up the binding all over because it was falling apart eventually. But I used that like crazy for the breeding, and I didn't get every monster, but I did end up getting a few of like the 4-star monsters from the different families. Like I got Yggdrasil for the plant family. I got the White King and Lazarus or whatever, the big bad, or not the big bad. The 4-star rank monster is for the undead family. So I never got to boss monsters or the unknown family, but it was fun just kind of messing around with the breeding system, and whether I discovered a new breeding pattern on my own for like a really strong monster, or finding like a particular monster from the guidebook and trying to follow the steps for that. That was always fun doing that. And I got plenty of playtime from Monsters 2 as a kid. I don't really have a lot to say about the Joker games. I played Joker 1. I didn't really get that far into it. It just really wasn't for me, and I didn't really care for how the game played. But I felt Joker 2 was, even though we didn't get the professional version, that Joker 2 did feel like a big step up and felt a lot more like what I enjoyed about Monsters 2 on the Game Boy Color from when I was a kid. It felt a little more like of the kind of a storytelling idea that they were going for with how the island connects to everything and how your adventure kind of kicks off. It felt more like a return to form than what Joker 1 was trying to do.
Yeah, Joker 1 and Dragon Quest and Terry's Wonderland are kind of nebulous in their goals. Like, they just give you this overarching goal at the beginning, like, hey, win the Starry Night tournament to rescue your sister. Hey, go check out all of these ruins. And Joker 2 kind of gives you more of a step-by-step. You've crash landed on this island. You need to survive. Go find this if you want to survive. Okay, great. We got that down. Now go find this if you want to survive. You're given more direction in the early hours of the game that teach you the mechanics and give you reasons to keep playing. And then when the game stops holding your hand, you have all the tools and you understand all the mechanics, and then you're kind of in this better position to actually play the game.
Yeah. Yeah, that was what I kind of like more about like Joker 2 and Monsters 2, because if it felt more like the game was sort of naturally giving you ideas of what to do next, or as you progress, like you got to learn more about the story, about how, like in Joker 2 for instance, like how the island connects to everything, and how important that the lion guy whose name escapes me right now, how he ties into everything. And you felt more like you were getting more out of the experience than like with like no offense to anyone who prefers like Terry's Wonderland or anything like that, but I just felt like I was getting more out of the experience as a kid and as an adult, or like as a young adult when playing Monsters 2 and Joker 2, just because you felt a little bit more weight to the situation, or you got a little bit more satisfaction from playing and sort of seeing like, okay, your efforts are paying off.
True. Bururian, what did you like about Dragon Quest Monsters?
So I played the first Dragon Warrior Monsters back when it came out, and this was very shortly after my stint with the other monster collecting game that starts with a P. And I actually enjoyed the first one a lot. I think on my first playthrough I put some 60, 70 hours into it. Yeah, it's a little, like Saigan said, it's a little more nebulous in terms of, overall gameplay and everything, but I played it with a Super Game Boy on my Super Nintendo, so I got those nice custom borders for everything. I just kind of like how the game gave you an overarching objective, like Yangus mentioned, of, hey, go save your sister. And the game more or less leaves you to your own devices to figure out your monster breeding and everything, although the monster breeding in that game is a lot more brutal than, preceding titles. But to be honest, I never did play Dragon Warrior Monster 2. I own copies of it over the years as I've added to my Dragon Quest collection, but I've never actually sat down to play it. In that time frame, I have played through Terry's Wonderland 3DS, because that was the first Warriors Monsters game I played, or Quest Monsters, whatever. And that's more or less where I stand on it. I guess I'm kind of the black sheep with it, because I know a lot of people love the second game for all of the different worlds and all of the whole key system and everything, but I just kind of like the raw, it just kind of puts you out there that the first game gives you.
Yeah, it's I was thinking as Saigan was talking a lot about Joker 3. Joker 3 like extends the linearity a little bit more. You're going island to island, and there's literally, you're on an island, there's a problem, you beat that boss, you completely warp to another island. And sure enough, you can go back and do stuff, but it is really, you're on an island, do it, move to the next. There's not a lot of reason to go back, except you can ride monsters in Joker 3, so you get different abilities to kind of fly a little bit and do some other higher jumps and whatever, so you can go back and get to some places you couldn't before, but it does take that. It's almost like a regular role-playing game, that has a progression and not just throw you open.
Yeah, what I will give every game after the first one is catching monsters in the first game was a task and a half. Because if you catch a monster, doesn't matter the gender of the monster, if you catch that monster and it is in your farm, it is like near, if not impossible, to catch another one, even if it's of the other gender. It is so incredibly hard to do that if you catch, I don't know, a tree stump male, but you needed a tree stump female, you more or less have to let go the other one just to catch the opposite gender of the same monster. So
definitely.
So once you start getting to the end game stuff and you want to breed the Dragon Lord for the first game, it takes a lot of effort in the original Dragon Warrior Monster to do a feat like that, comparatively to the second game or even the Joker's games. I think the Joker 1 was kind of hard to breed a lot of stuff. I remember spending Gosh, I think I spent like 50 hours before I got Trodain for Dragon Quest Monsters Joker.
Mm-hmm.
But that was also another task and a half. And the second game made everything so much easier. In fact, what I liked about the second game is that you could have like a single monster that took up all 3 slots instead of having 3 separate monsters. That was always fun.
They expand that, and I know there's even 4-slot ones in Terry's Wonderland and the remakes, the 3DS. So they start doing that.
Yeah, that's in Monsters 2 remake, but in a Monsters or Terry's Wonderland, there's still only just 3 monsters as the biggest size.
Oh, that's true. Which is actually really cool, because I played that on the translated one on my PC, and I did some upscaling, and it looks beautiful when you upscale it. I upscaled it until the maximum my computer could keep it in the 90% range, still going. But when you go to your monster farm, my kids would love just like, Daddy, go to the monster farm. And you could go there and you would see those size 3 and those size 4 monsters. You would just be like on kind of this balcony looking over, and they'd be huge. Like everything else, whatever. They look like your size. They're a monster that's 5-6 feet tall. But no, those large ones were large. You felt like you were standing 100 feet away from them, and they're almost like eye level with you up on this.
They really were, especially on Terry's Wonderland.
Yeah.
I remember. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say one other thing, and this brings up catching those monsters and everything. This is one of the only games. I mean, there may be some here because I haven't played all the ones that we're going to talk about tonight. But there's always a lot of these games have foreign trainers and the Pokemon trainers that you battle along the way. Well, this one you could, at least in the original couple games, you could steal monsters from those trainers during battles. It might take a couple sirloins as the meat that you would give them, but every time I would see one in Terry's Wonderland, especially, because Terry's Wonderland you could save anywhere, or I would do save states or one or the other. I think it's save anywhere. You just go up to them and you'd battle, and of course you'd see the percentage on the 3DS version. And man, there were so many I could catch with 2 and 3 and 4% if I just tried it 3 or 4 times. And you could get some, and even in the original Game Boy games, you could get some really high level monsters that were well above your ability and you'd never see anywhere, and just steal them from the random people that you were fighting. That was always great.
Yeah. I remember I didn't get very far in the Japanese version of Terry's Wonderland. That was one of the few Dragon Quest games that I imported. But I do remember I got to a point where I was able to fuse one of those 3 size monsters, and I was surprised. It's the monster. I don't remember if it's originally from the Monsters game specifically, but essentially it looks like a beetle that's constantly smiling. I think it was called Super 10 in the old Game Boy Color translations.
Oh yeah,
and that was one of the 3 size 3 monsters I could fuse. And I'm like, why is this a 3 size monster? Because I go to the farm, like you were talking about, and I see this giant dancing beetle when I go up to the balcony. I'm like, what the hell? I thought that thing was just a regular, like, 1 size star monster. What the heck is this? And when I took it into one of the battles, like, it's just, like, towering over, like, the slime that I had in my party. And when it attacks, like, all of a sudden, like, 10 other ones jump out of nowhere of that beetle and just start attacking. It's like, what the hell is going on? This is so funny. But
there's some random ones that they throw in there. There was the worm, the freaking earthworm thing from it was 5 or whatever. That's like one of the size 3 or 4 monsters, and you're like, really?
I think I saw a little bit of gameplay with one like that. Like, I think they buffed like that and like the giant slug enemy like up to actual giant sizes. Because I remember like when I was doing I think it was the Monster Arena, just at one point, like one of the enemies had a giant slug. I'm like, is that the same slug from Dragon Quest 2? Why is it now the size of a small house? It was so funny. But I haven't started the Monsters 2 remake for my 3DS, but I do like it from the gameplay footage that I've seen, that there are the 4-star monsters, and that each world now has its own like specific giant 4-star monster as sort of like its guardian deity of sorts. Like the ice world has a really cool one where it looks like a giant woolly mammoth with a giant igloo on its back, and it's got like this cool face mask. Its tusks are like this really cool, almost not quite a blood red, but about that shade, like that shade of a bright red, and it's so cool looking. And I remember seeing a footage of it fighting off against what I think is supposed to be the Dragon Lord's like super form, because in Dragon Quest Monsters 2, or Dragon Warrior Monsters 2, and this also applies to the original Game Boy Color game, there are 4 special monsters in the boss family that are like brand new entirely and are supposed to be like the super powered versions of the first 4 villains from the first 4 Dragon Quest games. So like you have the Dragon Lord, whose super form is Lord Draco, Sido, which was Malroth's name at the time, had a powered up form called Genocido. So even back then, they were still using puns. But let's see, Zoma's, I think, was Azure Zoma, if I remember correctly, or Azurma or something like that. And Pizarro's was called Psycho Piz, or Psycho. It's kind of like a play on Psycho Wiz almost, but it was just a P-I-Z at the end. And when you saw the artwork, like I think it must be new artwork for them from the 3DS remake specifically. You look at those things. Honestly, they're some of the really some of my favorite Toriyama designs. They are so cool looking. And it's such an interesting take on taking these 4 bosses and essentially just beefing them up and making them even more demonic and evil than they kind of already were with the original games. I have a heck of a time finding the artwork for them, and I might have them on my phone somewhere. But if you can find the artwork for those 4 monsters, like from the 3DS remake, they all look really cool. Especially Psycho Pizarro, because it looks like Pizarro's almost like fused with Estark, but he's wearing like a purple cloak to hide half of his form. It's a really interesting take on the character design. I really like it.
Anybody else want to comment, or can we move on?
I will say one more thing. I really enjoy some of the original music for the Monsters games. Like the song Never Ending Journey from the first one is still one of those songs that has stuck with me after like all these years.
That's the one where you go through that's the one you have in dungeons, correct?
Yeah, that's the song that plays in Monsters 1 when you're exploring the portal worlds.
Yes, that song always sticks with me. I could listen to that song all day long and never get tired of it.
Me too. I thought that the remake of that song that's featured in Joker 2 in the snow area Isolation, I think that's a really good remake of that song. For one, it's not in like the really bad MIDI synth that Sugiyama seems to like to use nowadays, like you hear in Joker or Terry's Wonderland, but it has a really cool sound to it because it emulates on the DS, or with the DS sound system that they used. It really can emulate the sound of the woodwinds and how like the violins sort of pick up and the string instruments sort of pick up as the song sort of reaches its climax before it quiets back down to start the song over again. And I feel like that kind of emulates the song a little bit better than what they tried to do in the Terry's Wonderland remake, which I just feel like didn't really do. It's still a good song, don't get me wrong. Like no matter what version it is, it's still a good song. But I think that if the former hardware for Nintendo handhelds can do a better job portraying the song better than what the newer handheld could do, that's not a good sign for the music quality that Sugiyama was using. But that's just a minor nitpick, because otherwise that song is it's probably one of my favorite Dragon Quest songs ever. It's just so good. I could listen to that. Just like you, Bururian, I could just listen to that song endlessly. It's so good.
All right, let's move on to another franchise here. We'll get away from Dragon Quest, our bread and butter. Another one that has relied heavily on puns. Yokai Watch. It's developed by Level 5, and this I remember this came over 6-7 years ago to the United States, and since releases come out here 2 to 3 years after they do in Japan. We're still waiting on Yokai Watch 4 for the Switch. I want to say it came out last summer in Japan, and they announced that it would be here in the United States. It's not yet, but...
I blame the pandemic on that one.
Yeah, that very well could be, because, you know, like I said, it takes a couple years to come out, so the fact that this might be around the target when you start hearing about it, and we haven't heard a thing, that could be a problem here. But these games, I don't know what got me to all these kind of monster games. I see them, I'm like, oh, that's different. I mean, I like Pokemon. I play all the Pokemon games, but then I see these too, and I'm like, ooh, this year there's no Pokemon game. What's this? Let me try this one out. And I played Yokai Watch 1, 2, 3, and the third one came out about a year and a half ago. It was one of the last things on the 3DS. We were talking before the show. I won't go into it all, but it's a pain to find a physical copy for this. They didn't print many at all. I was calling 6 different GameStops the night that it came out because Amazon hadn't even given me... I'd had it pre-ordered for months and didn't even say it was close to shipping, nothing. I got no information from them. It was just like, yeah, we got your order. We'll get to it. But ended up picking it up, and it was a blast. Blast. I got my own pun in there. Because they've got this whole side quest of Yokai Blasters, which was another game in the series that was more of like a real-time mystery dungeon-esque game that they almost sandwiched the entire game into Yokai Watch 3 as a side quest that I think I sunk at least 20 hours onto and didn't finish. But the game basically is you're a boy that's in Japan, very obviously. But the way they localized the first 2 games, they're like, no, it's in America. He's in America, yeah. Which created a little bit of a problem for Yokai Watch 3, because in Yokai Watch 3, in Japan at least, the boy was like, the dad's like, we're moving to America. We're picking up and we're moving to America. And the kid had to adjust to life in America, and they totally, do what Japan does, thinking what life in America is really like. So when they had to localize that for here, it was like,
hamburgers and tacos.
Yep. Like we already said that this was in America, but now the kid's moving to America. So I can't remember the puns, but they moved here and everything was like this Yahoo, Yahwee, Southern accent, Texan accent stuff. They just went crazy with it. And it's hilarious. It's level 5. It looks like a lot of level 5 stuff on the 3DS. They got the side quests. Just like, to me, it reminds, when I play it, I just think of like Dragon Quest IX. I think of Professor Layton games. That's what it kind of reminds me of. But the battle system's a little bit different than your turn-based. It's kind of turn-based, where your monsters are constantly attacking, and you can rotate them left and right, because the premise is you have a watch and the yokai are in your watch, and you can rotate your watch so that different monsters are in the battle at different times, and you can kind of use items and give them a few commands, but for the most part they're just doing their regular attacks over and over and like you pick stuff. So it's a little bit more involved than just, pick one-on-one battles. I think that's what I do, like the battle system more than Pokemon. I'm completely over Pokemon's 1v1 all the time. Although it's good to revisit for a while. It's like, man, I want something else, and that's why I really love
like those doubles.
Doubles are all right, but it's mainly singles all the time.
Yeah, that's why I'm not a big fan of Pokemon very much either. It's just I didn't mind it very much, like the single battle stuff when I was a kid, but the older I've gotten, it's more like, no, I prefer having more of a party, or like it's like if with Dragon Quest 1, I don't mind the single party thing, just because it's one dude going off and doing everything. But when you have like a team of 6 critters, it'd be nice if you had the option to like in the settings or something, like have it by default be double battles or triple battles, so you can use your you can use more monsters at once, that you collect with you, which is why I like Dragon Quest Monsters as a kid more. And why I like Yokai Watch 2, because, like what you were saying, Matt, where you can turn the, you turn like I think it's like the LRR buttons. It's essentially like you're turning the wheel of your monsters, so you can like pop out different ones if they have like their special meter charged up, or you can. Did it have like strengths and weaknesses for different monster types?
It does, and if you put like 2 monsters of the same kind next to each other in your watch, you'll get bonuses when those 2 are in and they're next to each other.
Okay. Yeah, so that was something that I remembered liking.
Was a bonus.
Okay, because that was something that I remembered liking about that, where you could. So I think there was like one in the first game where you get as like from a story one, and you can team him up with next to like the mascot character Jibanyan, and you got like bonus stats or something like that. So I kind of like that little bit of strategy for it.
Yeah, it adds something different. I mean, it's it's not as It's not as fleshed out as a Pokemon game would be. All these games kind of take place in 1 or 2 cities. Yokai Watch 3 finally, like, Yokai Watch 2 goes into the past, so there's an extra little city. Yokai Watch 3, you're playing as 2 different characters, one left behind in quote-unquote not Japan, and one in the new America, and you actually go to like 1 or 2 other cities, but it's a very like, hey, you're a kid on summer break, and this is just what you're going to do. You go home to sleep at night, your parents are there, sometimes you gotta deal with a yokai that is inspiriting. That's the big thing. They inspirit people. And basically everything bad in the world, anytime anybody has an argument, it's because there's a yokai invisibly behind them, making them do bad things or making them really ticked off. Your parents fight, and you're like, why are my parents fighting? Oh my god. Then you're like, oh, wait a minute, let me turn on my yokai watch. Oh yeah, there's a bad yokai there. They're making my parents fight. Let me kill them. Have any of you guys else played Yokai Watch?
I've thought about it, but I have no knowledge on the games, so I kind of just don't know which one to play.
Yeah, at this point, you should just play the third. It is,
I'm fine with
learns. That. Mm-hmm. The battle system is a little bit different than the first 2. I'm trying to think what they changed about it. I thought there's
if
just
I haven't played the first 2, then it won't matter.
It won't matter, yeah.
I was gonna say the story is like it doesn't like isn't one of those series where you can pretty much just jump into any entry and you're gonna be fine. Like you don't need to know about this happened in the first game, so if you're going, you're gonna be like totally lost. Nothing like that. It
is the same character every time, but honestly, there's always a story reason at the beginning, like, hey, look, oh man, I woke up and someone took all my yokai medals. I guess I have nobody. And now there's this problem in town, so let's go do it. I mean, there's some callbacks, but you can jump in at any time. You're not going to... These are not exactly the games that you're like, oh man, I'm missing out on some really deep lore here.
Okay.
But
deep lore.
I figured that might be the case just because, level 5 usually has like pretty accessible games regardless, but I didn't know if it would be like something where it's like, oh, well, you're not going to understand this unless you played the first game, or you're not going to get this little tidbit unless you like absolutely beat the game, Yeah,
your little ghost butler dude will tell you sometimes, hey, do you remember we fought this guy before? And I've played these games, come out so infrequently, it's like 3 years between them, and I'm like, oh, I did? Really? Okay, whatever. I'll fight him again. But it is actually the same character that goes from 1 to 2 to 3.
Oh, okay.
The third one goes really off kilter, though, with the whole puns and the whole play on America. You end up in the Wild West at one point, and it goes bizarre because there's aliens. Oh, that was the big thing. Number 3 has, I can't remember if it's the Y files or the Z files. I want to say it's the Y files. And there's totally a not Mulder and not Scully the whole way through the game.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's hilarious.
And they're like, they think there's aliens. And really, almost everything that they think is an alien threat, you're like, it's just a yokai. But I can't tell these people because they can't see them. They don't know what's going on. But then there really are aliens at one point, and there's yokai superheroes at one point. You have to go save a city, and they've got a whole set of superheroes. It just goes... They throw everything into that game, and it's just crazy and funny, and the puns... I wish I could figure out... There was a lion at the beginning that tried to translate for you, because you go to this new town, and in the Japanese game, it'd make sense that this kid can't understand because he just moved to Japan, or he moved to America, what people were saying. So they had a translator. Oh, it was a whole pun too. And I even asked a buddy who lives in Japan, and he went and looked it up, and the pun actually worked in Japanese too. I'm like, man, they really put a lot of time into this, and even the localizations, which may be another reason why it takes 2 years to get these. I'm sure they're not a high priority.
Did Nintendo handle the translation for this, or did Level 5 do it?
Nintendo is usually the ones that handle Level 5 like games for their systems. I don't know if Level 5's ever self-published anything over here. I mean on Nintendo systems, but to be specific, I don't know if they did any of their PlayStation games. Sorry, I should have been more specific when I said that.
No. I could tell you that is not the case with some of their Sony stuff. But we're not talking about that.
Excellent. But yeah, in the English version of the game, when you're playing it, like the kid comes over and people are all like, yeah, oh, the city, it's not the USA. He's in like BBQ. That's the name of the country. He's moved to the BBQ region, and that's why it's all
Texas.
Southern. And yes, yeah. That's why it's all Southern, and there's so heavy accent. And the kid's like, I can't understand what kids are saying at school or whatever. So you have to get a translator guy, and he's a lion. I'm trying to think what the pun is there. Can't remember. I've talked about it on other podcasts in the past, but it's pretty funny. It's a fun series. It's different. It's way more silly, way more goofy, and I mean, there's side quests and post game content galore in all these, like you would expect, kind of from a level 5.
I do like level 5 games. Ever since they did Dragon Quest VIII.
Oh yeah, that's what got me. Although I will say, I think I played the Dark Cloud before that, but level 5's good.
Did Rogue Galaxy come out before Dragon Quest VIII?
That's a good question.
Either way, I think it was either one way or the other of us. Oh, level 5 did this? I'm on board.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, they did Dragon Quest 8 and 9 and really set the series up well here in the United States.
I think that was Seth Green that really did that.
In Dragon Quest 9, you can do all sorts of things.
Oh, boy.
Well,
Well, if we're talking Seth Green, it's time to move on to another series. And this one, not even a series, it's just a one-off, but it is a one-off from a popular series, Monster Hunter Stories. Yangus,
Yeah, you played that, Yangus. Like I've played a lot of the Monster Hunter games, but how is Stories by comparison to the actual like main franchise?
So I am a Monster Hunter fan. Like I became a fan of the series back on the Wii with Monster Hunter Tri. A buddy told me about it. We both got the demo disc from GameStop. I was bad at playing it, but I still was having a lot of fun figuring everything out. And from there, I've played most every Western release that's come out, whether it's on a handheld or a home console, just whatever the case might be.
I remember us playing a lot of 3 Ultimate on the Wii U.
We did. That was fun.
Yeah.
That was great revisiting that game too, because 3 Ultimate, they really fine-tuned a lot of the stuff from Tri that worked, and they made it better. And they added in new weapon types, new monsters. They added an extra little sidekick character for you. Like that was a great that was a game that, even though technically I could have called it double dipping, since I bought the new version of it for the Wii U. It was well worth buying it, and that I had a lot of fun playing that, not only with playing with you, Bururian, but with a lot of the other people I met on there too, because most people were pretty, it was a smaller community because the Wii U just wasn't that popular of a system, but most everybody that was playing was pretty chill and pretty relaxed about everything, and it was easy to joke around with them or use the voice chat to be like, okay, well, we'll redo this quest a few times if we need to. But anyway, getting off topic here. So with Monster Hunter Stories, it was a game that when Capcom first announced it, it seemed like an interesting idea, where it was a game where instead of you fighting the monsters, it was the monsters fighting alongside you, and you either fought against other monsters or other, I don't remember what they're called in Monster Hunter Stories. I think they're just trainers or something like that. And, it's just essentially you're teaming up with all these monsters that you would normally fight against. And, from playing the main series, that was a really cool idea to hear about, because there's plenty of monsters that I've faced in the main games where it's like, it'd be really cool actually to team up with this thing, or, use this as sort of your trusty steed as you're right in the battle and face off against your enemies. Because you have most monsters in the series are usually based after a real life animal, or based off of an animal plus a combination of some sort of dinosaur. So you get a lot of really cool and interesting designs from the series as a whole. My notes. Anyway, so I didn't really get that far into the game, though, even though it had a really interesting, concept and everything going in. It really just didn't do it for me, because it's more of a turn-based RPG instead of an action RPG like the main series games are, which I wasn't against it being turn-based by any means, but it's more of kind of a rock, paper, scissors sort of mentality with the combat, and Plattym might be able to talk about that a bit better when he talks about the game. But
it's that battle system, it's quite basic. It's definitely not as fleshed out with lots of different types and lots of different weaknesses and everything. It does have your rock paper. So there's literally 3 things, and you can get a better attack if you pick the one and they pick the other.
Yeah. So, admittedly, the battle system itself just didn't really invest me that much. And with RPGs, especially if like the story for me doesn't really have to be a big selling point, as long as the combat is fun and the gameplay itself is fun to go through, like the motions, then I'm fine with that. Like, I'm not a big fan of the Persona series at all, but I still enjoy the dungeon crawling and the battle mechanics because it's still, what you'd expect from an Atlas RPG where you got to kind of figure out things and, strengthen yourself, make combinations of characters and whatnot, whatever the case might be, get stronger demons. And I was hoping that Monster Hunter Stories was going to be a bit more like that, where you could strengthen your monsters and the combat was going to be more than just like, okay, you pick attack or you pick defend or you pick the third option and you kind of rock, paper, scissors your way through it. So that kind of killed some of the fun of it for me. But I did like the visual style, how it had a more cartoony look. Monsters still had that more realistic look to them, but kind of more almost like somebody applied like a bit of a cartoony-esque filter on them as well. Like there's some pretty funny, like they're almost chibi-esque, I would say, but without being like a full chibi design of a monster. Almost just like you took the monster, kind of shrunk it down a bit, and just sort of instead of making it look a little bit more realistic, they just kind of smoothed out some of the details so it looked a little more cartoony. But like one of my favorite things about Monster Hunter Stories, even though I wasn't huge on it, was that you could team up with some of the different monsters that are sort of notorious from the series. Like you have the Kirin, which is based off of the Kirin mythology, where it's has the powers of lightning that resembles a horse. But in Monster Hunter, it resembles more of a dragon-like creature because it's part of the Elder Dragon family. And it's cool that you get to actually team up with them as not only as a steed for yourself, but that it can fight alongside you. And normally those things are so notorious in the main series for being nasty with their lightning. Well, the fact you're able to turn that around on your enemy is admittedly kind of satisfying, even though the combat itself might not be the most in-depth. Seeing stuff like that and seeing these monsters use some of their iconic moves or some of their iconic abilities to fight for you instead of against you, it's kind of satisfying. I will admit that. That's one of my favorite aspects of the game for sure, is getting to see these monsters just fight for you and defeat these monsters that are coming at you, and you get to fight alongside them as well. And the other monster I was glad to see, and Platy told me about this one since he got farther in the game than I did, was towards the end of it, I think you can finally team up with a Devil Joe, which I told, like, when Platy told me that he found one of them, I remember just kind of going in depth with him about everything about those monsters, because they are a nomadic species from the series. They're one that constantly shows up, and they have an endless appetite because of how their body structure works and how their metabolism works as well. So you get some really interesting encounters with them in the main series, because they can just start attacking another monster and basically start eating it to try and get their energy back up. Like, they're basically cold-blooded killers against anything that gets in their way. So the fact that you get to team up with one of these things to fight for you, like, I don't care what you say, that's really cool. That it would be so sweet as a Monster Hunter player to get to actually fight alongside a Devil Joe instead of having to deal with one of those things ruining whatever quest you were working on because it showed up and it's like, oh, I'm hungry. But yeah, from being a fan of the main series, I would prefer sticking with the main series, but it wasn't a bad idea for a spin-off by any means, and I think it was an interesting take on how to change up the Monster Hunter formula, and I hope at some point Capcom will revisit the idea again, because I think there's a lot more they could do with it, and maybe if they sort of fleshed out the battle system a bit more, it could be a bit more of an engaging experience for the player, and I might, want to stick with it all the way through the end, because honestly, I just don't remember too much about that game from what it was trying to do with the story or what it was trying to do with the characters. I just remember that you could fight alongside a lot of these cool monsters that you met, and that was really all I kind of cared about.
Yeah, and I made it all the way through, and I've never played a Monster Hunters game other than like a demo a couple times, and I've been like, I'm not a big action role-playing game fan anyway, so it wasn't for me. I really want the battle system to be what I enjoy with a game, and I haven't got that out of those games, and that's fine. I know it's very popular. People love it. But when this one came out, it came out with a demo on the 3DS, and it was something that, like, I sunk 4 or 5 hours into that demo. You just have this huge area. And yeah, you're a person, they find you at this village and they're like, oh, you can tame monsters too. Cool. We're a little subsect that actually tames these monsters. I know the rest of the world hunts them, but we have the power to tame them. And it's funny because the way you get new monsters a lot is randomly throughout the world, there's monsters' dens. And when you get to the end of the monster den, there's a nest. And you can walk in there and pick up an egg, and a lot of times the monster's in there and you're like trying to grab this egg, and they're huge. You're like waddling out with the egg, carrying it out of the dungeon and getting it back to hatch it at the village. And I mean, I don't remember a lot of the details from this game. I do remember, much like Monster Hunter games, it's all about equipment. You can get all this different equipment. You're getting pieces dropped from the battles that you have, and like, ooh, now I've got all this cool armor. And it doesn't really affect the stats as much individually, but you can get a whole set and that looks really cool and maybe grant some fire resistance or something. So it like Yangus was saying, it's definitely a different take on the series. I thought it was good. The battles at least went quickly, even though they were pretty, like I said, they weren't deep affairs too much. But they did go quickly. They were fun enough that I was like, oh, this is fun. I mean, the areas were just huge that you were walking around in. Like, I don't know. I'm surprised the 3DS could keep up with this kind of stuff, that it was just such vast areas. You're talking like Dragon Quest VIII kind of areas, and there were just so many continent-sized areas that you'd be going and exploring.
Yeah. That's definitely one of the most impressive things about that game, too. Like, I was pretty surprised, like you, Platty, how big some of these areas were and how detailed they were. And I do like, too, how they sort of employ the different abilities like different monsters have, where you can use one to help you climb up certain walls, or, you know, if you got one that can swim, it can go across this water for you safely. You know, so there was a lot of thought, I think, put into the world design. And it reminded me a lot of, like, how Capcom changed things. It almost makes me think maybe that they did that as sort of an experimentation for what they wanted to do with Monster Hunter World. Because in Monster Hunter World, instead of areas being split up by little sections, where it's like Area 1, Area 2, Area 3, for your different world maps that you would travel to fight monsters, instead all of the environments were like one giant seamless map that you would explore instead. And I almost wonder if Monster Hunter Stories was sort of their way of testing that to see maybe what players thought of it before they tried to employ it into the main series. Because with how Monster Hunter Stories handles the environments where, you know, you got big explorable areas, which again are pretty impressive that the 3DS could handle that as well as it did, that it seems like perhaps that was just sort of an experimental phase that actually really paid off for them, to then be like, okay, you know, we'll employ this into the main series, because in World, it works great for it, and it's so much easier than to find certain monsters. Absolutely. But what were you going to say?
Oh, that was about it. I was going to wrap this one up and move on to some other series. I know we had planned on having Brother Jaybird on here tonight. He unfortunately couldn't make it, but he had mentioned bringing up Monster Rancher, and this is something I have no experience on. So I'll let you guys, and I know we chatted about it beforehand, that we have very little with this. You guys want to spend maybe 5 minutes on this one? And
I always really liked the concept of Monster Rancher, because I know it was a PS1 game way back in the day, and I remember seeing the cartoon when it came on television. I actually watched a fair amount, if not like at least half of that series, and I enjoyed the monster design for it a lot from the cartoon. I kind of enjoyed what they kind of did with it, because the monsters could talk with the humans. They all had their own personalities and everything. But mechanically speaking with the game, I always liked the idea that you could scan CDs to find monsters. It was kind of I don't believe anything else was kind of doing that thing at the time that Monster Rancher was doing that I can think of. Do any of you have any idea if that was the case?
Like, the only game I can think of that lets you scan a CD for extra stuff was a game called Vib Ribbon for the PS1, where you put that in and it would like make a track based on whatever song you picked, or whatever CD you put in. I mean, yeah,
there was another PS1 game that was very similar to that a friend had an imported Japanese copy of, it was basically the same kind of thing. You would scan a CD and it was basically DDR, but you would scan a music CD and it would generate a track for that. But I guess in terms of monster hunting, or monster collecting, there wasn't really anything else kind of doing that at the time, which made it a very big draw. And I always wanted to try it, but my parents would never buy it for me, and I didn't have a job at the time the game was out, so
I
I
tried
could
it
never give it a try.
myself. Yeah, I tried it myself, and it was odd. It was a neat gimmick being able to throw a CD in there and get a random monster. And I want to say that there was another. I don't know if it was another Monster Rancher game or just another series in general, but there was one you could scan barcodes and it would generate a monster for you.
I feel like I remember something like that in the early 2000s. It was kind of like its own console thing. Maybe if it wasn't on a PS1.
That might be it. I foggy memories of that time.
Yeah, I remember something in that time period of, you go out and you scan barcodes of everyday items and you can earn monsters. It was kind of like a Tamagotchi kind of thing.
But the main gameplay,
go ahead, Mel.
Yeah, the gameplay loop of Monster Rancher, I've played it a little bit. I've got it kicking around here somewhere. Was basically you generated a monster. You had so much time during the day for different tasks, and you could set them to train in different ways. And then at the end of the season, you'd put them into a tournament. And that's like all I really remember of it.
I didn't even think about this one when we were coming up with a series, and I'll talk about it for all of like 30 seconds. But this whole scanning stuff, just the way you said that, Bururian, have any of you ever played Denpa Men on?
Oh yeah. I played the hell out of that first game. I loved it so much because you know why? Because it reminded me a lot of a Dragon Quest game.
Mm-hmm. And that one, you got new monsters by different Wi-Fi signals.
Yep. Yeah,
I
remember going everywhere to find specific monsters because it was like, oh, I need a Denpa Men with a really good cure ability. So I would drive around to different areas and scan to see if I could find something.
Yep, I lived in a townhome community when I got that. So it was great. I'd go walk the dog and, I'd be passing 60 different houses, basically, who could possibly have different Wi-Fis in all of like 5 minutes. So it was very quick. And I do remember, like, right around the corner, right by the dumpster, towards the back of the neighborhood, one time I had a chance to catch the Denpa Man that had the Heal Us All spell. The version, because you mentioned it was like Dragon Quest. Well, there was one that had a spell that could heal everybody fully at max, and I missed it. And I swear I walked back and forth, and it wasn't but like 10, 12 days later that finally, at that same corner, that same guy popped up again. So just hitting whatever frequency that Wi-Fi was. But yeah, it was generated by that. And there were 3 of these games. They were all 3DS store exclusives. Mm-hmm. I don't think they were ever physical, but
no. They were eShop.
Played the hell out of the first. Yep, played the hell out of the first, beat that, and then started to play the second one, and maybe it was too quickly back to back, but I was like, oh my god, the grind up this is just nope, not gonna do this.
That's how the first game. That's how the first game felt at times. Is it just had sometimes it just had felt like a never-ending grind with trying to get your party up just enough so you could make it to the end of a dungeon, which. I never gave the second or third ones a try, but the first one I played, gosh, I must have put 40, 50 hours into that game.
Yeah, that was a big one when I was in college because a lot of us, a lot of my buddies and I, we were all playing that at the same time, and we'd be like, oh, I got this Denpa Man. Like, oh, I got this one. And we were all trying to see if we could beat it. But honestly, the second half of that game, it gets real grindy real fast. And we all just kind of were like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. I just stopped playing the game because I normally don't mind a challenging RPG, but I don't like it to be challenging for where it feels just like, oh, you gotta grind in order to get strong. Like that, I can't.
Yeah, it was either you had to grind or you had to find the right Denpa Men to get you through. And if you didn't have one with this very specific ability, sometimes you had a really hard time making it through a dungeon.
Yeah, that's why I gave up on it.
Yeah, because what I hated was you could get elementals, and then you could get non-elemental Denpa Men, and that could severely impact your team if you go into a specific area and you don't have the right loadout.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a whole. There's a whole. You want 100 hours of content. There's a bunch. So yeah, back to Monster Rancher.
I didn't even know there was a third Denpa Men game, to be honest with you. I knew there was a second one, but I never knew there was a third one.
You should go and watch the Japanese commercials for those games sometime, because they are an acid trip.
Oh yeah, it's still out there. The Denpa Men 3, The Rise of Digital.
Yeah,
and
that was it. Yeah,
digital. It's Digitol.
Digitol. Wasn't Digitol in the first game? I think that was the name of the island or something.
He might have been, yeah. So this goes back to like 2014 and
yeah.
But yeah, definitely a very
Monster Rancher.
Monster Rancher, yes.
I feel like some of the developers that worked on the game have previously worked on Dragon Quest games. I want to say.
The only thing I really remember from Monster Rancher was that I remember there was a TV show for it, and I just remember the theme song was just this obnoxious guy going like, "It's Monster Rancher, it's Monster Rancher. You're gonna go find them." It's just like I don't remember the rest of the lyrics. I just remember him going Monster Rancher. It was so stupid. Like even as a kid, I'm like, this is so stupid. And we would sometimes see it on at my daycare when I was a little kid, and I think we only watched it because we were waiting for like Pokemon to come on or something. But you know what? Like, only thing I remember from that show, and I'll just say this real quick, and that's the only thing I have to say, is that there was a boy, this little pink and green monster-looking, like roll-up sort of armadillo creature, a giant eyeball that was yellow with a big mouth and like was sort of the annoying character.
He looked like a shrimp. He looked like a shrimp.
And then I think there was like a rabbit with a southern accent. I think.
Yeah, there was something like that. That sounds familiar.
That's all I remember from that show, and other than the annoying theme song for it. And I mean, it's cool though to see that the games are making sort of a comeback on the Switch, where they've like done remasters for the old PS1 games for it. But
that's really nice.
I just don't really have much desire to check it out. But it's like, it's cool they're bringing it back for the fans, however many there are. I don't know. Sorry, what were you gonna say? What were you gonna say, Scott? Bururian?
Oh, and before we move on, I did double check the developer for the Denpa Men games, Genius Sonority, had most of the staff in that company previously have worked on Dragon Quest games. So I think that's, and I didn't know that going in, and when I played it, it felt very familiar to me. So I think that's what drew me into it.
And you know what? Just saying finding that one guy that had the heal us all spell, I want to say a lot of that felt very Dragon Questy, like a lot of the exact spell names, and it might have been like cure everyone all or something like that. I don't know, but you're right. That is one reason I think I stuck with that game more than a lot of other little stuff. I mean, this was a 3DS download game for a couple bucks, and I don't think I spent 40-50 hours on it, but I'm pretty sure I spent like 20-30 on it, and I kept freaking walking that damn dog every day, bringing my 3DS around, staring at it, almost getting run over in the community because of that.
They also co-developed Dragon Quest Swords.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, that's where I know the name.
So, Denpa Men, if you got a few bucks before the 3DS eShop dies in a year or two.
I feel like it's one of those series where you got to say the name just with a really bad Japanese accent, a Denpa Men or something like that.
No, you got to flat say Denpa Men.
Denpa Men 3DS Hotspot.
All right, we'll get out of Denpa Men and Monster Rancher. We've got another D word here. We've got Digimon, and this is another one that I have almost nothing to say on. I actually beat Digimon World DS 15 years ago. Had a red dinosaur. He could evolve, he could devolve. I think there were split evolutions at some point. And that is my total memory of the entire Digimon series. So I'll let you guys talk about this one more.
So the only Digimon game that I have personally played was the one on the PS4, which was Cyber Sleuth. I have not played any of the Digimon games before it, but I watched a lot of the anime back in the day when it was new on television and all that stuff. I know there's been a lot of them. There's been 20, 30 games of Digimon at this point.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat as Bururian, where I grew up watching the show. I never really played any of the games. I did know about the PS1 game. I think it's called Digimon World, if I remember correctly. And apparently that's a notoriously hard game because of how the mechanics work. But I remember liking the show a lot more than I liked Pokemon, like the Pokemon show as a kid, because like Digimon shows tended to handle, or not handle, but tended to be geared a bit more towards mature sort of content, what they would focus on, not something where it's like graphic or anything like that, sort of mature.
No, they just
more
had
so
more
the themes.
They had more adult social commentary compared to, say, Pokemon.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. They had more of a commentary to stuff, or how like the kids would handle certain events in their lives. Like one of my favorite series or seasons of that show in particular was Tamers, which I believe was season 3 of it over here. And it was one where the kids, originally they start out in Japan and they meet their Digimon. They have to take out the 12 Zodiac Digimon. And eventually they end up going to the digital world through, I don't remember the means of how they end up getting there, but they have to find their way home essentially. And a villain ends up following them out of that. But during that whole section, there's one of the girls, I think her name was Terry, if I remember correctly. She has her partner, Digimon, Leomon, ends up getting into a fight, and he ends up dying from it, unfortunately, which causes her to have some real stress issues. Like, she pretty much shuts down, has, like, post-traumatic stress disorder from it. She doesn't want to open up or talk to anybody. All she really can think about is Leomon, like the last words he told her, and it's because of that then leads to the overall villain of the show to escape from the digital world and cause problems within the human world. And it was really interesting watching that as a kid, and I'm not going to go into too much details, but mainly to see what she was going through and how something like that affected her was like something that was sort of affecting my life at the time. So it felt like a more relatable experience, a more relatable show than like something like Pokemon was, where it's like, I just want to be the best. It felt more human, I would say, like more of a, like they were trying to go for a genuine sort of connection you could have with these characters almost. And that's why I've sort of always appreciated Digimon, because like looking at some of the other seasons of the show and from watching as a kid and kind of looking back as it now as an adult, it's like, there was actually a lot of more adult themes that they were tackling, and, more for, kind of asking kids to sort of understand these concepts that perhaps could be a bit challenging for them, but, it's something that they should try to come and understand. And it was interesting seeing that from an English translation, too, still mostly being intact, because, most shows at the time that were from Japan that were getting translated over here were usually by 4 kids, and they really changed the content of stuff. So it's just kind of interesting how they kind of kept that intact with the show for the most part when bringing it to a Western audience.
Yeah, and that was they actually took some risks with Digimon that were rare for the time, the cartoon show, by having it be a continuous narrative instead of just Monster of the Week. Mm-hmm. A lot of cartoon producers in that era hated that idea because they just wanted a commercial, So the fact that they took the time to license it and localize it was actually a really big risk, because it just goes against everything that they were trying to put on the TV at that time, stuff that targets children. They didn't believe that kids would follow an ongoing narrative from week to week.
Yeah, that was the cool thing about that show too, how, like, especially with watching the first season of the show, how they started off on File Island, and eventually it led on to, they defeated the villain of that one, which I think was Devimon, if I remember right. Then they ended up fighting about the 4 masters who essentially were controlling like the digital world as a whole. They then, I don't remember what happens after that. I think they go back to their home, but you had like a story that constantly was changing and evolving, and you see the characters growing from their experiences. So that was something that I found really cool as a kid, and that's why also I like that Digimon Tamers season so much, because it really had to focus on the characters changing, and like even the villains changing too. But you didn't really see that so much as a kid.
Yeah.
So that's a good point that you, or we didn't see that with television at the time. I mean, so that's a good point you brought that up. But for games, I haven't played any of them, but I do have the Cyber Sleuth collection for my Switch. I got it for like $20 brand new, and I just haven't started it up yet. But I'm looking forward to playing it because I want to see how many of them that I remember that I recognize from a kid, and how many of them are going to be like, well, I have no idea what one this one is.
I think you will. I think you will enjoy Cyber Sleuth. Having never played a Digimon before, and I played through a fair amount of that game. I really enjoyed it.
I haven't heard a negative word spoken on Cyber Sleuth. That's one that regularly comes up, recommended to me while I'm streaming.
As an RPG, it's very solid.
That's good.
Yeah, it's good to hear.
So what's the collection for the Switch? Is that a couple older games, or?
It's the two. It's Cyber Sleuth is the main package of it, and then I think what it was is that I don't know if the PS4 version or if it was something for the Vita, but there was like essentially a second story that was added as DLC that you could get, where it's either from another perspective or it's just like a sequel sort of story to it. And the Switch version is basically you have both those games in one package.
So the PS4 version had some DLC missions that you could do that were like, I think, $1 each, and there were like 4 of them. It might just be all of that packaged together.
Could be. I haven't looked too much into that, but I do know
it's not the other Digimon games on the PS4 that's packaged into that Switch version, is it? Because I think there was a sequel to Cyber Sleuth. Again, Cyber Sleuth is the only Digimon game that I have personally played.
Yeah, let me look real quick on because I got my copy over here on my shelf. We'll take a look and see what the box says on the back. Because I know I was looking that up and decided to get it for the Switch because it had kind of an all-in-one sort of thing to it. Let's see. Yeah, it says includes both Digimon Story, Cyber Sleuth, and Hacker's Memory in one game. So yeah, it's basically a 2-for-1 package.
Hacker's Memory was another PS4 title, so yeah.
Yeah, so basically it's a 2-for-1 then.
Alrighty, so anybody else got any more Digimon memories before we move on?
That theme song has never left my head after all these years.
Final thought is I always liked how you could digivolve them up and down. You could go back and forth with different evolutions of them, comparative to like Pokemon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the like 3 things I remember from that game. Had a little dinosaur, beat it, but I could go up and down. They do have the branching evolutions, right? You can, if I'm not mistaken, or am I totally off on that? Like, you can evolve one of 2 ways?
I believe so.
It did. Each of the Digimon had like so many Digi-evolutions, depending on how they were raised, but you could also de-evolve them back to like a base form.
Okay, so if you didn't get to go the way you wanted, you could... That's how I always understood why there was that de-evolving. Because, I mean, otherwise, why would you go back to an earlier form?
Yeah. I remember, because I had the guidebook for that Digimon World game, which was funny because I didn't have a PS1, but I had that guidebook from, I think, a buddy of mine who gave it to me, or I just happened to get it. And I remember it saying, like, depending on how you trained the Digimon, that can also affect what they evolved into, because like one thing was hygiene was a factor, and if you didn't like properly take care of your Digimon or make it like clean up after itself, if it did something, like it eventually would turn into what was literally just like a piece of poop Digimon.
Well, I mean, this was a Bandai Namco game. You got to remember that this was sort of based off Tamagotchi, so if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's what they originally were. I had one of the old Digimon Tamagotchi toys that had a little link thing at the top, and you could stick them together and they'd fight each other.
Yeah.
Huh. Oh, I actually didn't know that they were inspired off of that Tamagotchi stuff. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, they were kind of marketed as like Tamagotchi for boys because, you know, they're monsters that fight each other.
Yeah.
And gosh, the only people I knew in middle school that had Tamagotchi were boys.
Yeah, I had one.
I had one as well.
I always remember the... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I also had just a regular Tamagotchi.
Oh. I always remember the big argument when I was a kid was which one was better, Digimon or Pokemon. That was always like what we would talk about, because Pokemon was real big when I was a kid. Like, that was like one of the big new things when I was like 5 or 6 or so, because that's when the first generation came out. But that's also around the time that Digimon started coming out. So it was always an argument on the playground between the guys where it's like, no, Digimon is better, no, Pokemon is better. It's just that old. It's kind of like the Nintendo or the Super Nintendo versus the Sega Genesis sort of argument, where it's like, no, the Pokemon is better because of this. No, the Digimon is better because it has this for it. Different generation, same sort of argument.
I think that's about all I got on Digimon as far as that goes.
All right, let's move on to the next game on our list. There's actually 3 of these out. I don't think any of us have had played many of them, but the series is called Siralim. You want to talk about this one?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Happy to. And on top of the 3 being out, they've also announced a digital card game coming out for it, and I think a 4th game has also been announced. But Siralim is a fantastic monster training RPG. It's an indie RPG. It definitely looks like an indie RPG. The sprite work in it is rough, but it tends to run very cheap on Steam, and it's available on most of the consoles. It's even available on mobile. And I want to say that all of the games even allow for cross-platform saving. So you can play it on Steam, and then you can load up your game on your cell phone and take it on the go. Siralim is interesting because it's kind of like this fusion with roguelikes. There's a dungeon, and the deeper you go into it, the better monsters you find, the better treasure you find, of course. If you die, you don't lose everything, and instead, you have to start back on the first floor of the dungeon again. What confuses things and makes things more complicated is the entire game scales itself to your current party. So every time you go in to the first level of the dungeon, the monsters there are about the equivalent of what you have. So progressing further and further is always going to be very difficult.
That reminds me a lot of Azure Dreams from the PS1, which kind of did the same thing.
That's a name I've not heard in a long, long time. What really sets Siralim apart is how customizable everything in it is. You are given so much control, not just in how you form your teams, which your monster teams are members of 6 active monsters at a time. Mm-hmm. So it's 6-on-6 combat. Really, after the first hour of the game, it's always going to be 6-on-6. And the abilities and the way that they interact with the other monsters and the attacks and everything, it really makes for regularly engaging combat. It's not like in that Nintendo series where you're just, you roll into combat and you use the strongest move that you have and you win and you move on. Just 2 or 3 floors in, you're fighting things way stronger than your current group, and you have to be knowledgeable of the game to be at all successful. And there's just so many systems in it, and you even equip them with gear, and that gear is customizable too, and also gains levels. So it's a very deep rabbit hole that continues to introduce. I feel like a new system got introduced almost every hour I was playing it, and I'm fairly certain that I could go and pick it up, play it for another hour, and get introduced to another system that I wasn't even aware of. And it's definitely one that I would recommend checking out. I've been told that there's not much reason to play the first or second game anymore and to just pick up whatever the current one is, because the mechanics haven't really changed. They've only kind of evolved. So you'll just get a better overall experience playing a current one. And the first one didn't really have a story.
Oh, it had pretty much no story. I think that's what finally made me peace out on it.
Yeah, it just kind of kicks you into it. And they're like, okay, make your own fun.
And I mean, I had fun. Like I said, for about 5 or 6 hours, I was doing a lot of that. And then it made me realize, I'm like, okay, I don't, there's no point to this.
You don't really.
And I think I did go online and look at like 2 evolved it a little bit. And I think when I played it, 3 was still a little bit out. It's been out for a couple years now. But I did read I was in their Discord server about a year and a half ago, and I was actually at one point I posted a question and the developer answered like right away. So I kind of got back and forth on Discord.
Active.
Yep. And I was asking like about how long the main story was and whatever, because I was thinking of trying to pick it up and review it at RP Gamer, but when we write reviews on RP Gamer, you got to roll credits, and I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm going to stick with this to roll credits.
Yeah,
enough to put out a full review.
So it's daunting. It almost feels to me like the Disgaea of the monster hunting series, where you have a very thin layer of story and then just an ocean worth of content and depth hiding underneath it.
Yeah, I mean, there's crafting in there. I saw, at least for the third one. I kind of was looking up the third one today, which is on Switch. It's $20, and like you said, it's on everything. These things are. The third one's on mobile. These are not highly, like you said. The sprite work is interesting. This can run on everything. This is definitely a game that can run PC. You know, your 3-year-old phone, your 5-year-old iPad. I'm sure pretty much anything can run this at this point, but.
Yeah,
it did have some interesting stuff, and 700 monsters in this third one. Like, my gosh.
Oh my.
Yeah, it's huge. And on top of that, there's still like monster breeding, like fusing Dragon Quest monsters style. There's also a monster summoning system. So you can summon in fresh monsters instead of just combining two monsters that you even already have. Just the number of systems in it is mind-boggling, but it introduces them very organically and slowly. So you never feel like you're getting overwhelmed with it. What I am overwhelmed with is the idea of going back to it after being away from it for a while. Because just racking my brain now over all of the stuff that there was in the first game, like, man, I might as well just get the newest one or wait for the fourth one to come out and just start over.
That's how those games feel, though. If you don't stay consistent with them, you just kind of lose everything if you take any kind of break.
So, yeah, I mean, I picked up the first one, I want to say, on a Vita sale for $1. I want to say the second one I got for like $3 at the same time. So it was a very low investment just to be like, hey, I'm going to do this. And I remember messaging Yangus back and forth and being like, I'm going to stick with it. I was looking at the trophy guides. Once I get my first like silver trophy, that's what I'm going to be on. I was looking at the like that PSN trophies website. I was looking it up. I'm like, okay, like there's really no ending to this game, so my ending's going to be a silver trophy. And I think not long after, I mean, probably within a week of getting that, Trails of Cold Steel came in the mail for my Vita,
and then you were distracted.
That I was distracted, and yeah, I've never gone back. But I think I would definitely pick up the most recent one. Number 3, because it does have a story mode, and the developer told me it was like 20-30 hours if you just wanted to kind of mainly go through that, depending on how much you ground and whatever, do your grinding.
And then if you enjoyed the gameplay loop, getting through the story, then there's very, very easily hundreds of hours of content to go through. It even has kind of a weird multiplayer system where there's some kind of competition in how far you can get in like daily dungeons, and I think you even have an online team that'll auto battle. I feel like that was also a thing. It's never like a 1-to-1 like Pokemon thing where you're directly playing against each other. It's more like hey, here's my team, and you just kind of release it into the ether. Oh right, yeah, Joker was like that. I forgot. That's how I got my Schleiman tank.
Yeah, because you would log on and you'd control your team, but you were playing other people whose teams had been uploaded.
Man, don't even get me started on the Joker Online. That was so busted.
It was not balanced.
No. As a lot of these first games in these series, we've keep talking about, like, skip the first one. Yokai Watch, go straight to number 3. You want to play one, go to 3.
With Siralim, I would probably say go straight to 3, just based on everything that I've heard on it. And then I would do that with the warning that it looks like there's probably a 4th one also coming out.
Yeah,
But
there was something when I was looking it up today. I can't remember. It had a word. It wasn't like Siralim 4 or something, but I don't know if that was a collection or something. Siralim Ultimate or Siralim.
I don't
Game.
remember.
I think
Oh,
it's
it looks
Siralim
like I
Ultimate.
left their Discord. Dang it. But yeah, friendly developer. friendly
Siralim
community.
Ultimate, late 2020. It is not out. Oh, great! It's gonna have 1,000 monsters.
Oh boy. 1,000 monsters.
Choose
More
from
monsters than you can
1,000.
shake a stick at.
Oh my gosh! So
I'll only get it if they have a monster like they introduced in the Dragon Quest Monsters 2 remake, where it's literally a wagon with a horse and just a bunch of random monsters surrounding it. That's really a monster. I'm not kidding.
we're getting to the point where pretty much anything you can imagine is there.
I think I was like you, Platty, where I just picked up the first and second game like on the cheap for my Vita, but I never started them up. But I know they were. I think I still have them on there because I don't think they take up that much space, like for memory card wise. But I mean, I'm curious to start them up, and like from everything that Saigan's been talking about with the games, like I'd gladly give them a shot. They sound like they'd be a fun time.
I
They
think
tend to run real cheap.
we enjoy
too.
that because you enjoy your Etrian Odyssey with the team building and making that team and working with their skills quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it sounds like something that'd be up my alley too. It's just I just never got started with it. But it's not one of those games where like you miss out on content if you're not connected to Wi-Fi, is it? Because I know you said something about like a daily dungeon. Is that something that like blocks you out of content entirely, Saigan, or is that just only applied to one of the
that's
games?
just for like leaderboards and things. The online connectivity in the game is not what I would call robust.
Okay.
It's very much an afterthought. The focus of the game is not online play at all.
Okay, all right, just check.
No.
I wanted to make sure it wasn't one of those games where you like totally missed out on something if you didn't connect to the Wi-Fi at like a certain point or whatever.
You get 980 monsters.
Oh no!
Whatever.
How will I
would
ever
you
get
do?
those last 20?
Wow. All right, so I will. I'll do a real brief one here for the next one, and then we do have a couple little ones left that people want to shill for. But I'll do my shill first because, like I said, the idea for this episode came about because last week I don't know where I came across it, but I saw that there was a new Nexomon game, which I was like, what's Nexomon? I've never heard of this, but boy, that sounds familiar to something else. And ended up finding out there was physical copies of it. I love my physical copies of games. And it's Nexomon Extinction is the name of the game. It's the second game in the series. The first one was a mobile-only title. And picked it up. Got it. Had to end up ordering it. Like it said it was on Amazon, but it was like, yeah, it'll get there in 1 to 2 months. And I'm like, what? What do you mean 1 to 2 months? Ended up going on to Walmart.com, and they shipped it to me from Long Island, and got here in a couple days for free shipping, store to store or whatever. But it is 2006, 2007 Game Boy Advance. I guess it'd probably be a little bit earlier than that. It's 2003 Game Boy Advance Pokemon that looks prettier and has a couple little tweaks to it that I don't know if it makes it better or worse, but if you love that era of the Game Boy Advance Pokemon, it's that, but it looks way more beautiful because here we are 15 years later. And it's funny because I'm going to review this, and my goal in the review, when I write a review for this, is to not mention Pokemon at all. I'm just going to totally treat this as it's its own game and just kind of explain some stuff. But it's really hard to say here on the podcast it's anything but 2004 Pokemon. I mean, you get 6 monsters. They can evolve 3 times. They even poke fun of it. The game's got some very meta jokes. Like one of the early NPCs is like, nobody knows why, but nobody can ever carry more than 6 monsters with you. I don't know what's up with that. And you've got a little guy that follows you around. You can change your little following guy, but you're followed by Coco, is your companion at all times, whether you see him or not. And he's always there to comment on you because you're a silent protagonist. He's always there to make the jokes like, I can't believe you fell for that, or don't you know that you can't put more than 1 monster in a battle, what are you doing? And it seems like they're all very meta, like monster collecting game, specifically Pokemon kind of jokes. You've got your potions, you've got your super potions. I was a little annoyed at the beginning. Like, the opening movie had a typo in there's no voice acting, but the opening bit is spoken, and there was a typo in the closed captioning of the opening movie that changed the meaning. If you were just reading it, it'd be like, what? But what the guy was saying was perfectly understandable, and I'm like, that's kind of... How did you mess up captioning the opening movie? And there were a couple like really obvious typos in the first 2 hours. I haven't encountered anything for the next 10 hours after that. And some of the things that I've like tiny little gripes I've had along the way, I already read. There's a new patch out. We're recording this on September 10th. I want to say the patch for PC came out like the 7th. It's probably already on PS4, and I need to wait about a week for the Switch approval process to go through and get my patch. But I've already seen... I just passed one part where, and here I am like 12 hours into the game, and I just got into the main gameplay loop. Like, I have this item that I don't want to mention because it's very spoilery, and this game's brand new. So, but I've got an item, and I need to go get 7 things to make this item. And I just got the first one. I'm like, okay, where I kind of know what I'm doing for the next, 10 to 20 hours, getting the other 6 parts. But all of a sudden... I'm out in the wild. I'm encountering 3rd level Nexomon, like the 3rd evolutions already. And I'm like, wow, this is really early to be hitting 3rd level stuff. And I'm getting not killed by normal battles, but they're tough. And I can't get through more than a few normal battles before I got to run back and heal. And I did see they're totally changing the game flag for that. Or like one of the first NPCs is like, oh, before you get your Nexomon to evolve, just check your bestiary thing and it'll tell you what level he evolves at. Yeah, it doesn't say that yet, but they're patching that in. So a couple other
Get
things.
it eventually.
Yeah. So, I mean, within a week, this seems like it's already getting its second big patch of stuff and they're even changing something that people have asked for. They're like, apparently a lot of people want this. So we're throwing it in a chest right at the orphanage at the beginning of the game. Go get it when the patch comes out. I guess the biggest difference about it, and something I'm a little mixed. I really like the idea. I wish maybe they could cut costs down a little bit, is this plays out like most other normal role-playing games where you have your hit points and then you have a skill points meter. It doesn't have spell charges or skill charges like Pokemon would have, or and you were saying it earlier, Saigan, that you can just, you walk in Pokemon, you just walk in and you use your best attack every time, whatever. Well, in here, you're walking in with like 150 hit points and 100 skill points. Well, if you want to use your best attack, that's going to cost you 20, and they really don't recharge much. So if you do that for 2 battles, you're done. That guy's pointless until you go heal again. So you can really quickly go through your skill points, and that's where I am right now to survive these like level 3 kind of tier 3 monster battles out in the wild. I'm like, holy cow, man, I fight 5 or 6 of these, and I'm rotating my guys around, and I'm like, okay, everybody's out of skill points. Time to head back to heal. I had to do that about 2 hours into the game. I had to spend a good hour grinding because I was getting really annoyed. There was low EXP and low money games, and I was getting my butt kicked because there was no really good attacks that you could use over and over and over again. You're really having to decide, do you want to use that big attack and use like 25% of your SP that's not going to recharge, or do you want to try to use that one that only costs like 5 and hit them a lot more? Well, of course you're getting hit at the same time and whatever. I think it makes it more strategic than Pokemon because it is one-on-one battles. Again, I like that concept, so I'm not just using the same attack over and over. The attacks actually have speed stats for the actual attack, and a lot of the big attacks go slower. A lot of the small SP attacks go faster, so if they're down to 5 hit points, I'll use that little one to get in the attack before they do in each round. So interesting. I mean, I'm sure they'll keep working on that. Like I said, it was a mobile only title before this came out on PC and PS4 and Switch all together. So I think it's a really cool take on the formula. Little balances will be happening along the way, but I'm glad I got it. It was definitely worth the $30 I paid for physical. You can pick it up for $20 digitally most anywhere. And 12 hours in, I'm definitely 100% planning on going through with it. So fun game.
Cool. I was actually going to compare my next game to Pokemon and how it's evolved from that, but it really sounds like it took a lot of the changes that Nexomon made to the formula and kind of built on those instead.
Tell us about TemTem.
So, TemTem, it's currently in early access. That said, it is super, super polished for an early access game. It's not complete yet, of course, but when they do their content patches, it feels like they've polished it for release. I'm currently sitting on almost 90 hours of this game.
Wow.
Yeah. It's very long, and it almost feels like an alternate universe where the gameplay loop in Pokemon continued to evolve instead of stagnating. So, like Nexomon, instead of having individual power points for each of your moves, instead you just have a stamina gauge as well. Where it differs from Nexomon is you get your stamina back after every fight, and instead the moves cost larger amounts of stamina. On top of that, they also have charge times, so your biggest and best moves you can't use on the first or second or sometimes even third turn. You have to wait 4 turns for some of your biggest, best moves to charge, and on top of that, it uses a massive amount of your stamina. If you use more stamina than what you have, it takes from your HP and you become exhausted for a turn. Building on top of that, all combat in it is 2v2.
Oh, thank God.
It's so good because on top of the combat being 2v2, a lot of the moves get kind of a kicker. The moves a lot of them will change depending on what the partner TemTem is. So you'll have like a water move that does like 50 damage, but if the partner Tem that's also out fighting next to it is a wind type, then it gets a boost and it suddenly does 80 damage and adds the cold debuff. So there's a lot more team building involved and figuring out like, okay, well, I can have this guy on my team and I really like this move, but this move is really only good if it's paired up with one of these other guys. It is 100% Pokemon DNA. Like it's
I'm looking at the picture on the box and I'm like, well, you know, I know who that is.
Like
I know who that is.
Brand, it's Target Pokemon. But the changes that they've made to the core gameplay loop really make a massive difference. The change from the power points to the stamina meter, the change to they cut the amount of different types. It still has the rock, paper, scissors gameplay, but they cut it down to 12 types.
Yeah, Nexomon is 9.
I love that. Pokemon's gotten a bit ridiculous. 15 was already a bit much, and they've just grown since then.
Is it to 17 now or something like it? It's high teens, yeah.
They added Dark,
Fairy.
Yeah, there's Steel type. That's another new one.
They added Dark and Steel in Gen 2, and then it was just that for a while with 15. And then they added Fairy with, what, Gen 5?
Gen 6 with the 3DS games.
Yeah, it's...
so maybe it's just 16.
Because like the big one from Gen 6 that they kind of showed that off with was the new EV evolution where it's Sylveon or something like that.
Yeah. There's also no complete immunities in TemTem, so you never run into a situation where you just can't do damage. The worst damage drop you'll see is a quarter, and that's if you're fighting a dual type TemTem, and both of those types resist your attack. But aside from that, it has a lot of the Pokemon trappings. Even the breeding is really similar. It's got the effort value training, but it doesn't hide most of this stuff behind a lot of RNG. You can see what your TemTems, EVs, and IVs are just on their menu. It's really easy to track down how to train them, and all this stuff is actually presented to you in-game.
That's a nice change.
It's such a nice change. You're given a lot more control over breeding. At the breeding center, you can actually buy items to force certain stats to carry over into the offspring. So there's so much less RNG in the breeding. There's less RNG in the combat. There's no critical hits. There's no misses. So you always know exactly if you're going to hit and how much damage you're going to do.
That's nice. Yeah, both of those play a big part in Nexomon, because there are skills that will boost your hit percentage, skills that will boost your critical percentage, and that rate is listed right on the skill when you do it. So both of those two things, which I hate the RNG of that, both of those play a big part in every single Nexomon attack.
Yeah, and it's nice to see RNG be removed completely from TemTem, and it really goes with their focus towards it being it's definitely online. It's billed as almost an MMO. It's more of an MMO light. Like, you see other people running around in the world, and the game, actually, you can play through the entirety of the story mode co-op.
Oh, wow.
And that is a blast. That's what I did with one of my old WoW buddies. We played through almost the entirety of the game in co-op. There's like one or two sections that you have to slog through solo. They don't last too long, but they do really suck when you've been playing through co-op. And because of the changes to the combat design, with there being no RNG, the fact that, there's only 12 types to deal with, and that stamina gauge management, it becomes, there's so much communication that happened. The first gym leader in this game is way harder than going Charmander against Brock. And that's if you go in prepared. She was brutal. They're even going to include a built-in mode for what's that run called in Pokemon where you're only allowed
the Nuzlocke?
The Nuzlocke
It's going to have a built-in Nuzlocke mode.
Oh, wow.
Where you can just say, I want to play Nuzlocke, and it'll let you play Nuzlocke. It took us a couple of hours, like over an hour, maybe 2 hours, to get from the first town to the second town. Every decision you make in combat matters. And it's tough. But because there's no RNG element, you never really feel like you're getting screwed over. And the story is also massively improved. Like, you look at the graphics, and they're fun. They're bright. It's definitely off-brand Pokemon when you're looking at the graphics. It's well-designed off-brand Pokemon, but we all know what it is. But playing through the story, it kind of starts off, and at the beginning, it subverts your expectations in a very clever way. And then as the story builds, it starts dealing with much more mature concepts, like the gray areas of good and evil. And like in the recent content patch, the new island that they added, it was a story about a war. Like, this island that you go to is being invaded, and they're not handling it in like a silly way. They're talking about how it's impacting the lives of the people who live there and the lives of, other people around it. And you wind up on the forefront of a lot of these battles, and it does a lot to subvert your expectations of the Pokemon gameplay loop and the story loop, because stuff happens that I was legitimately surprised by. Like, there's really solid writing there hidden under this presentation.
And that definitely seems like a step up. I didn't even mention that with the Nexomon. The opening movie is, we live together in harmony with our Nexomon and blah, 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 blah. And then it just kind of says, that's what people want you to think. Yeah. And there's mainly one main town, and the rest of the world, as you're walking through it, it is really bright and colorful. I mean, it's like Harvest Moon with the contrast turned all the way up. Yet you walk by an abandoned car and a traffic light kind of on its side.
It's
just
kind of
walking
subtle
through the forest. And there are huge gashes just in the ground that you have to walk around. And it's because these monsters some of them just want to wipe out humanity. And sure, some people tame them and fight with them, and it's all cute and fun. But there is a lot of them out there that are just, we're going to kill all the humans. And that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So
that's great environmental storytelling. And the TemTem doesn't do too much with the environmental storytelling. There's some bits. But the fact that they're able to deliver a much more mature, darker, but without being like edgy about its story. It was just refreshing. You still have a rival in this game, like you're used to in Pokemon. I hate him. I hate him so much. Like Prince Charmless levels of hate.
It's Charmless.
The worst.
Hey now, Charmless is a great character. What are you talking about? He is the pride and joy of Argonia. He is perfect in every way. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, no, this character, like, they set him up as your rival, and then as your relationship devolves with him, like, you really start to just hate this kid. And then they do a great job of almost making you feel guilty about it later. Because there's other cutscenes, and you see that things have been kind of complicated for him too. And just the storytelling is fantastic. There's usually extra stuff to do. They have, with this current patch, they added actual ranked competitive battling. So if that's something you're into, it's definitely there. The story content, if you want to play through single player, is great. If you want to play through co-op, way better. But a lot of the combat is definitely designed with the expectation of high level one-on-one battling or 2v2 battling. But yeah, the 80 something hours that I have, I'd say a solid 60 of that has just been doing the story, and it's not complete yet. It's so dense, and the areas are so well designed, and there's characters that you actually care about. There's branching dialogue with a lot of characters. So you'll take the time to read it. You don't just mash through hearing about how, Machoke helps me build buildings. It means something. It's world building, and it's just so fresh and nice. And if you're looking for something like Pokemon but not Pokemon, I would absolutely suggest TemTem, because it will be instantly familiar, but enough has changed that it's going to trigger those points in your brain that stopped thinking about how to play Pokemon years ago.
Looking it up, I see that it's now scheduled to come out for PlayStation 5, Switch next year. So when it's not going to be PC only, it's definitely coming to consoles. And it's going to be
cross-platform as well.
Oh, that's cool.
It's all one cross-platform server, consoles and PC. Nice. There's a guild-like system in there, and it's been so much fun to play. It's how much is it right now in early access? It's like $30. Which
I want to say it was like 34 or something.
Oh, it's almost $40. Yeah. But, for me, I've gotten over 80 hours of gameplay from it already, and they're not even done with the single player content. So it's been a great purchase for me. I can't remember the last time I put 80 hours into a Pokemon game. I would have to say probably Pokemon White was the last time I broke even 50 hours on a Pokemon game.
Well, if you're a person that puts hour per gameplay to dollars, this is definitely a deal.
For sure. And if you can get somebody to play it with you, it's a blast. I didn't realize how much Pokemon was missing a co-op component. Playing through TemTem.
Co-op sounds awesome for that.
It does. Yeah, talking about this game, Saigan. I remember now where I've heard the name from. I remember when the game was first popping up on early access, because just since I follow some different gaming news sites, a lot of people were like, "Oh, well, it's trying to be the next Pokemon," and everybody was trying to write it off. But then once they got their hands on it, they realized, "Oh, wow, this actually isn't that bad. It's pretty good."
Yeah, it really is the next Pokemon. We've just been getting the same Pokemon for so long. And it came out at, I don't think it was intentional that it come out at about the same time as Sword and Shield, when everybody was at peak disappointment in Pokemon. I don't think that was their intention, but it certainly worked out in their favor. And I was also in the camp where I looked at Sword and Shield and I was like, I don't want to keep playing this. I'm sure that the content that's there is great for the people who want to keep playing Pokemon, but if you want to change, but inside really enjoy the Pokemon formula, TemTem's for you. The only caveat with that is it is always online. So you do have to play it online. I know that is a turnoff for some.
Well, if you want to play an offline game that's also really exciting, Bururian, you remembered something else as we're recording here.
I don't know if I can sell. I don't know if I can sell this game as well as Saigan has sold TemTem.
I've been shooting around ideas for writing a TemTem review for a while, so I came in semi-prepared.
So let's go back to the far reaches of 22 years ago, to the year of 1998, when Monster Rancher was, kind of big for its time. This game was called I don't believe Platy said it, but because I talked over him, but Dragon Seeds for the PS1. Now this was a specifically dragon-oriented monster hunting game. I remember playing this one a ton because I rented it from the local Blockbuster like every chance that I could get. But it kind of did the same thing that Monster Rancher did, to where instead of CD scanning, this game took memory from other games, like saved memory files from other games, and you could create dragon monster teams out of it, which was a really cool feature if you had some kind of off the wall saves, because unfortunately it would just read something like Dragon Quest 7 as the same monster every time, no matter what you did with the save. It just recognized the game and created a monster based off that. But this game, it has a story and it doesn't have a story at the same time. So, if I remember right, it's something like global warming has caused the polar ice caps to melt, and dragons were uncovered from the polar ice caps melting. So people started collecting the dragons to battle them, right? And everybody gathered in this one large city, and it was just called literally Warm City because, polar ice caps had melted. Your character has no backstory coming up. You literally show up to the gates of the city, and it's just like, oh, hey, are you here to fight dragons? Well, come on in. We'll assign you a apartment, go to the dragon cloning lab, make a dragon egg, get your journey started to battling dragons. But as soon as you enter into the city, you had one dragon with you. And it's the most brutal way they handle the tutorial is you have your dragon and you run into the mayor of the city, who goes, hey, if you fight me for a tutorial, I'll tell you how to breed good dragons. And then he utterly and brutally kills your dragon in front of you and goes, don't worry about it. I've been training dragons for years. You can just go clone a new one at the lab. And he goes through the setup and showcase for all of that. But so this was a dragon battling game, and there's different types of dragons that you could have. I believe there were about 6 types of them. The ones that you started with, they were they were dragon based. Well, they're all dragon based. These were dinosaur based. They kind of all looked like dinosaurs, and depending on their types. The dragons that look like dinosaurs would have swords and shields and stuff like that. And then you had winged dragons, you had beetle-looking dragons, you had sea-looking dragons that look like lobsters and shrimp and stuff like that. You had dragons that looked like insects, ones that looked kind of like statues. And I remember the very weird type. They were just called evil dragons, and they kind of resembled really off the wall things. I remember one of them being literally a door. literally a door with a dragon head and dragon arms and a tail, but it was a giant gateway looking door.
That's cool.
But what you would do at the beginning of the game is you would go to the cloning lab, and it would be hey, choose a phrase, and it would give you 3 kind of drop-down menus, and you could choose a bunch of different stuff. And you could say stuff like the past is shining, and you would get you get like a Saurian dragon with a light element or something like that. So on top of that, all of the dragons had their own elements, and there were only 3 types of elements in the game, if I remember right. There were 6 types of dragons and 3 types of elements, although I can't quite remember what the 3 elements were.
I think every time for the phrase thing, I would just put "the door is alive."
The door is alive. Looking it up. All right, here it is. They were normal, they were super, or they were mutant, and there was a lot of variations with the dragons. So you could create a ton of them in the cloning lab, and they would come out in different sizes and different colors and different shapes and stuff based on the types.
Ooh, I want a crustacean dragon with the head and claws of a crab.
And you know what? You could most definitely have it if you played your cards right. But the battle system itself was based on a whole rock, paper, scissors kind of thing. So at the beginning of every round, you would get to input 2 different commands. And you could do a weapon attack, a special attack, or a reflector attack. So if you did your reflector attack, if they did a weapon attack, you would just kind of rebuff it and nobody would take damage. Or if you had if you did a special attack, you can do, depending on your type and the element of the dragon, you could do your special attack X amount of times. Also depending on if it was a baby, if it was an adult, or if it was like an ancient dragon. But the real kicker here is, what do you do with these dragons? What is the story to this game? Well, like I said earlier, there's really no story. You literally show up to fight dragons in the Colosseum in the city. That is the whole thing. It's like, remember in Dragon Quest Monsters how you were trying to work your way through the different tiers in Great
Starry
Tree,
Night.
to get to the Starry Night tournament. It's basically like that. You're just trying to build a better dragon so you can get to the best portion of the gladiator ring and beat whoever was at the top. But there was a ton of different stuff that you could do, and you could play training games with your dragon to help improve their stats. You could even trade dragons with friends if you wanted to. You could also, I think, cross memory card battle with them, but I don't think there was breeding per se with other players. But you could, build a dragon team, and then a friend could build a dragon team, take your memory card to their house with their copy, plug your memory card in, and battle each other that way, which was a very nice feature. But, I never had another friend who had that game, so I never got to try that one out myself. But it was a very fun game that was very different at the time, because I believe this came out the same year here that Pokemon did. Because it came out in late 1998, and I think that's when Pokemon released over here. Is that right? 98?
Yeah, I think it was 98 because I know I was 5 years old at the time.
Oh, jeez, you make me feel old, man.
97, maybe 98. Yeah, in there.
But it was for me, it was Monster Hunter before I knew what Monster Hunter was, because not Monster Hunter, but Monster Rancher, because I think I watched the cartoon a couple of years later. But I always remember this being really cool on being able to create like fully mature dragons off of memory card save files. So I would out of all my games, I would just generate a save file so I could plug it into the game and see what monster or what dragon I could get out of it, and try to train it properly. But it's a very fun game. If you can find a copy, I would suggest it just based on the dragon battling aspect of it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. You talking about it reading your memory cards for different dragons, it just totally made me think of Psycho Mantis from Metal Gear Solid. I just imagine the game being like, so you like to play Spyro the Dragon? We'll have a purple dragon.
Yeah, and I remember that being a really cool feature at the time, because when you rented a game from Blockbuster for anybody that's not over 25.
I remember Blockbuster.
Like 99% of the time, you didn't get anything with the game other than the game disc. If you were lucky, there was some scribble about the game written on the back of the rental case, or you might have gotten the instruction manual with the game when you rented it. But most of the time, you got the disc, and if you didn't know what was going on, you had no idea about some of the features of the game. So when I figured out you could generate monsters from save files from other games, it made me think of that, Yangus, just like, oh cool, this is like Metal Gear Solid.
Have the Psycho Dragon on your team.
But I remember, I think the best dragon I ever got, it was like this kind of giant, absolute unit of a dragon, and it was like rainbow colored, and it was white and reflective, and it had a sword and a shield, and it just decimated everything in its path. But because of the whole rock paper scissors nature of it, it kind of made battles a little what's the word I'm looking for? A little annoying at times, because if the other opponent would just kind of do a defense every time, you really couldn't do anything if you've both exhausted your special attacks. So then it comes down to who's got the higher strength stat, because they're going to win.
Interesting. I will have to say I looked this up on Wikipedia, and the reception from major publications and websites do not agree with your attitude to go ahead and pick this up. I didn't know that, certain websites give things 5 out of 10. Usually right now, like a 7 out of 10 is horrible, but there were some lows here.
A 7 out of 10 has always been average, even though on a scale of 1 to 10, that is not average.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm looking at the reception on the wiki page now, and I'll agree.
I'm glad someone's speaking up for this game, because apparently back then other people were not.
It's a very basic game, but it's one of those things. If it hits you at the right time, it's a great game.
Oh, I've definitely there's plenty of games that I've.
Hey, remember the last side quest when I talked about Fester's Quest? It's exactly like that. And I
it's a horrible game. It's a horrible game, everybody.
Everybody play it. It's a bad game. It's a very different thing. It's also it's a 22-year-old PS1 game at this point. It's going to be a little rough around the edges for anybody going back to it now.
Well, it sounds like it's definitely creative with like the dragons designs, because like the one you talked about, that was kind of the white rainbow-ish one. You got the one that's shaped like a door, which is definitely silly, but I kind of like it when they go silly with designs too. So it definitely does sound like there's some creativity thrown at the game, and it's not just like, oh, well, here's just some generic-looking dragons, but they're just slightly different.
If you can look past the jank, it's a fun game, and that's all that matters.
True. If you have fun with it, then that's what matters.
I mean, you talking about the door dragon, that's enough to get me interested. I want to see what that looks like. I want to see a dragon shaped like a door, man. That just sounds hilarious.
Right there, you're sold. Alrighty, so I think if we're talking about door dragons and
it's time to close the door on that conversation.
Oh no.
Before Yangus talks more Monster Hunter, we're gonna we're gonna wrap this one up. So that's it for this episode of Slime Time Side Quest. Thanks, Bururian, for some definitely obscure chatter, and Saigan for your TemTem advertisement, plus many other thoughts on this.
I was not paid for this particular shilling.
Disclaimer.
This episode brought to you by TemTem. Pick it up on Steam now.
Coming soon, early next year.
Coming soon on the consoles near you.
Yep. Backwards compatible with PS4. Oh. So, guys, thank you very much for doing this one tonight. This was something that it was bred out of a momentary purchase like a week ago Monday, and I was like, wow, there's a lot to talk about. And as we found out, there was even more to talk about.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us, guys. We definitely had a heck of a lot to talk about for all the series, and I mean, if Platy would let me talk more Monster Hunter, I mean, we could be here for a while. But no, it's been fun, and it's definitely cool hearing about stuff like TemTem and like the Dragon Seeds game that Bururian thought of, because it's always cool hearing about these new experiences and stuff that you might not necessarily check out for yourself, but hearing good word to mouth. It's it's fun having those kind of conversations about games that you might not be on your personal radar as much.
Yeah,
I've
and there's
never
so
heard
many alternatives out there that a lot of people just aren't aware of. If you're tired of Pokemon or you like the idea of monster battling, but playing it just wasn't your thing, there's so many alternatives out there that kind of get drowned out because of this one or maybe two super popular franchises.
There was another one that I was trying to look up that I played on iOS one time, and I got all the way to the end, but there was like a pay gate because nothing you normally walk around and grab was going to be strong enough to beat the last kind of boss rush. But I mean, it gave me 30, 40 good hours. I want to say it was a lot of 3-on-3 battles. So again, it had changed up that formula from just 1v1, rock, all the kind of typical stuff. But hey, man, I got 20, 30 hours out of it for like $1.99. So I wasn't too, nope.
But hey, it's like Dragon Seeds. I have, outside of like one other friend, I have never heard anybody in my life talk about this game. And if you're looking at reviews of the game, maybe it's for good reason.
Alrighty, so there you go. We've got a lot of options for you, from 22-year-old games that read your memory card to a dozen years ago. You can, or not even that long, but you can get Denpa Men downloaded on your 3DS, go take a walk and hit up people's Wi-Fis randomly, to games that are massively multiplayer online experiences, still an beta release, or early release, but coming soon. So we've run the gamut here from before Pokemon even to right up through tomorrow. So you also might have noticed that something we never talk about on our podcast, and I always bring it up, is Patreon. We don't use Patreon on Slime Time. We're just longtime fans that want to speak about the topics we know and love so much. But if you got some extra money laying around and you're not looking to buy Dragon Seed, you could go over to the Dragon's Den site at www.woodus.com/den and click on support the site. Woodus has owned and maintained the Dragon's Den fan site for 20 plus years. He'd appreciate any donation. If you don't want to just give him money, there's plenty of affiliate links there to pretty much anything Dragon Quest related that you can find on Amazon, and he'll get a small fraction of that sale to go to support this den.
If you have any suggestions for a future Sidequest episode, we'd be happy to hear from you. You can reach out to Platty via his Twitter, Plattym3, or via Discord for the Dragon's Den official Discord server. You can also contact me at YangustheLegendaryBandit via personal message. Just search for my name, no spaces between any of the words. We have a list that's full of ideas, and like we said at the very beginning of the episode, it's one that we just kind of will scroll through, pick a topic we're interested in discussing for that week's particular episode, and we have tons of ideas that we haven't even gotten to yet, and ones that we might revisit at some point if we want to. But if you got any suggestions, we're happy to hear from you and add it onto the list.
Or if I buy a new game, boom, there's a new one on the list.
What? That's not how you pick. That's crazy.
Worked out well today. So, all right, again, guys, thank you very much for joining us. All you at home,
thanks for having us.
bye, everyone.
Side quest complete.